So you see, I break this down. We are in Imperial Rome. We are in part A, the first century. Well, in the first century, I classified this further into chapter 1. This is the Julio-Claudio Dynasty, and it starts with Emperor Augustus at 27 BC. This dynasty ends in 69 AD. So here we are, the first century, Imperial Rome. Octavian just came back from the Battle of Actium. Now, Rome's battle record at this time is 80 victories, 35 losses, and 2 draws. The rules that I was putting up that I believe Rome followed throughout her long history as guidelines. We have 7 of them so far. The 7th one was keep promise to your legions, and you'll find that the emperors that follow that rule will do better than the emperors that did not follow that rule. So Octavian comes back to Rome, and he was a little bit smarter than Caesar. Caesar was right in the Senate's face. He imposed his will and his power, and he was the main guy, and he let everybody know it. Octavian was different. He never contemplated abolishing the time-honored magistrates. He just simply assumed all the titles. He was the consul, the tribune, the proconsul. And after, remember, he exiled Lepidus to Sicily. Well, Lepidus died, and he then called himself Princeps, which means leading man, or Princeps Sentius, which means leading senator. And Octavian, he was able to establish this authoritarian regime based on Roman maintenance of widespread law and order, mainly because he lived to be 77. And he was presiding over an exhausted world. Remember, Civil War was going on for quite a while, and that allowed him to establish the law and order at the expense of people's liberty. Now, let me just interject here 1 second. When Octavian returned from the Battle of Actium, he had built this memorial for Caesar, and this is a sign on the outside. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you would miss this in the forum, but it's pretty cool. And this is Caesar's burial site inside this temple. And the sign says that he adorned Caesar's burial place here with gems and emeralds that he took off Cleopatra's ship, because remember, she was laden with a lot of treasure. But anyways, these are cool shots. Back to Augustus. Augustus made sure at all costs that he kept the appearance of the Constitution visible. Not only did the army recognize him as the supreme authority, but he also knew the importance of finance for political power. Unlike Cassius or Antony, who never tapped into the Egyptian wealth, Octavian plundered it. Now, in the outlying provinces of the empire, the command was under Augustus, but in Italy, where no armies were stationed, it was administered by civil and senatorial authorities. Now, Augustus wanted to establish borders for the empire out on the frontier. He wanted the boundary in Germany to be at the Elbe River and along the Danube River. Now, he went to great pains to try to accomplish this. Now, some people might think this was a defensive approach. They might feel that Emperor Augustus, which what they call Octavian, took a defensive approach, but this is by no means a defensive approach, because in order to exert the Roman strength all the way out to the Elbe Valley, Rome had to take offensive actions. Now, also, there was a Praetorian cohort in a legion, which was the headquarters cohort, and guarded the commander. Now, it developed into the Imperial Praetorian Guard, a privileged corps, originally composed of 9 centuries, 1,000 strong bodyguards to the emperor. Now, 2 praefecti were appointed to command the guard. In this role, Lucius Aelius Caenus was Augustus's guard commander, and he becomes extremely powerful. And then later on, through the empire, the Praetorians realized all too well how much the emperor depended on the guard. Now, I want to say that before we continue here, Mark Antony, his record is not very impressive. He went 1 in 3 in major battles. The only battle he was victor in was the one with Octavian at the Battle of Philippi. So that's all he had. And the other commander that we're interested in would be Marcus Agrippa, who went 3-0, and they were all in naval encounters. And because he has no more famous battles. In fact, what I want to show you here is this is a picture in the Forum. Okay, this is down the streets of the Forum. The Roman emperors, they would march down the Forum here. They would stop at the Temple of Jupiter, get off their chariots in the middle of their triumph, go give sacrifice. They'd be carrying their conquered foes in chains. They would send them into the maritime prison right here to await their execution. Now, this picture here, Augustus had built this for Marcus Agrippa and for his victories. And this is some pictures inside. And then right here, this is across the street from the Forum. This is Emperor Augustus's palace right here. Anyways, those are some cool shots. Back to our battle. Now, the first major battle comes in 11 BC for Augustus. It's on the Lippe River. Now, to safeguard the development of Gaul, Augustus found it necessary to stop the Germanic raiders across the Rhine. Remember, that's always been Rome's intention and excuse for operations in Gaul was to keep the Germans from crossing the Rhine, to keep the Germans, they would migrate across the Alpine mountains. The Romans always use this as an excuse to go attack the Germans. Now, Augustus sent his stepson, Drusus, to subdue the Germans. Drusus crossed the Rhine and marched far into the Lippe River Valley, meeting little opposition. But on his return, he was surrounded. Now, Drusus struck hard at one point of the encirclement, broke through the lines, and routed the Germans with heavy losses. Drusus returned to Gaul. 2 years later, he took another successful campaign into the German lands. Upon his return, he had fallen from his horse and was killed. Can you believe that one? Now, his brother, Tiberius. Now, Tiberius is the future next emperor, but Tiberius continued the campaigns and succeeded in receiving the German submission without even a major battle. So this is a victory, goes on the Roman battle record, the Battle of the Lippe River in 11 BC. Now the next battle is a famous battle. It's a decisive battle in world history. It's the Battle of Teutoburg Wall. This was in 9 AD. Now, remember, the Germanic tribes were subdued up to the Elbe, and this is where Rome and Augustus wanted to put their frontier borders, and they maintained a strong presence there. Now, Quintilius Varus, with 3 legions, was beguiled into marching east to put down a local insurrection. The Cherusci chief, Arminius, who was a scout in the Roman army, was at the same time arousing a rebellion, and unsuspecting Varus marched into the forest between the Ems and Weser rivers. Remember Vercingetorix? He was also an auxiliary for the Romans, and he led a rebellion. So it's amazing how you learn the enemy's tactics. These guys are successful when they do that, and then they fight against them. Now, the visibility of the Romans here was severely reduced due to fog, the thick woods, and marshes. Now, Arminius, he had slipped away unnoticed during this march. Suddenly, a large force assaulted the column. The Roman auxiliaries, which were Germans themselves, deserted en masse. The disciplined legions held their ground against the invisible tribesmen. The next day, Varus tried to resume his march, but again he suffered heavy attacks, and to top it off, it was raining this next day. All day it was raining. Now, the Roman cavalry tried to escape through the dense forest, but they were annihilated. Now, by the end of the second day, only a handful of infantry were left. On the third day, the bloody ambush was over, with the last of the 20,000 troops succumbing to Arminius. Now, after this battle, Augustus pulled the boundaries from the Elbe back to the Rhine River. And years later, it was said that you could still hear Emperor Augustus cry out, "Varus, Varus, give me back my legions." After this, Augustus reduced the total legions to 28. The significance of this battle cannot be overstated. It is recognized by all historians as a decisive battle because what this did was it prevented the Romans from conquering Germany, therefore bringing civilization to Germany. And that's why Germany did not develop into strong centralized governments like the way France and England did, because the Romans were there, controlled it, and brought law, order, and civilization to them. It took Germany much longer and a lot more stages to get to one centralized government. So even though there was more campaigns and successful campaigns against the Germans, the Romans were never had that idea of controlling Germany now, because even though after the Roman world had conquered everybody, Augustus was supreme over this great empire, there was nobody that could beat him. But the crushing defeat at Teutoburg actually had the Roman people, the Senate, even Augustus was in mourning for a while. It had them in despair and in fear that the Romans were not invincible like they thought. So this battle is very decisive no matter what happened after this. So Emperor Augustus dies at the age of 77. He was the first emperor of Rome. And this is a mausoleum shot of where he's buried. It's about a mile north of the Roman Forum. And it was being worked on, construction on it, so I couldn't go in it, but there it is. And Emperor Augustus' battle record was 5-3, being involved in two major and very important ones at Actium and Philippi. And that moves us to our next emperor, Tiberius Caesar Augustus. He is the stepson of the first emperor, Augustus. And that brings us to the next major battle. And it happened in 16 AD. It's either the Battle of Minden, they call it, the Battle of Augustus, or the Battle of the Weser River. Now, he sends an avenging force into Germany because of what happened at the Borough Wall. And the man commanding this is the new Rhine Legion commander, and it's Germanicus. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Germanicus and Tiberius later, but the two armies, they drew up for battle in an open plain at the Weser River at Minden. The German right extended into the forest. The Cherusci tribe was in the center under Arminius. The left held the plains by the Weser River. The auxiliaries manned the Roman front, Gallic, Batavian, German, and Swiss allies. The second line comprised the Praetorians and 4 legions. Detachments of the legions were in the third line with the cavalry on the flanks under the command of Germanicus. The two centers charged each other while the Roman cavalry had turned the flanks. Only the German center pushed the legions back, while the German wings were moving in the other direction. And this starts one of those classic envelopes. The center started to be carried as well, and the massacre ensued. Arminius, wounded, had escaped. Now, as Germanicus was conducting campaigns in Germany, there was an inconclusive battle fought between the German allies and the Romans. And then there was the Battle of Agrivarian Wall, which was the final battle in this campaign against Arminius. And the figures are hard to come by, but the Romans had anywhere between 50 to 80,000 strong, and they believe that the Germans had anywhere from 40 to 75,000. Now, according to Tacitus, after this 3-year campaign, this final battle ended in a Roman victory. But it must be noted that none of these victories were decisive enough to allow the Romans to control Germany. And Tiberius had ordered Germanicus back across the Rhine. He wanted the frontier established there. Now, before anybody wants to say that he did this purposely against Germanicus, it must be noted that Germanicus also felt that it was too costly for the Romans to try to control the Germans up to the Elbe. It would be way more efficient to pull back to the Rhine. And he felt that the Germans are in such disarray at this time and divided that it would be years, years before they'd get their act together. So Germanicus agreed with the pullback. It must be noted that, remember, 3 legions were destroyed at Teutoburg Wall and their eagles were taken, their standards. And 2 of the 3 had been recovered now by this campaign by Germanicus. And let's go over a little bit of Germanicus' story. Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus. Now, he received the name Germanicus from his father, but he did become the commander of the Rhine legions, and he did make successful campaigns against Arminius in Germany. He was a great leader. His soldiers loved him and trusted him. Now, he was the grandson of Octavian Augustus, and he was the nephew of Tiberius. Now, Augustus had appointed Tiberius as emperor. Because of this, the Rhine legions, the German legions, revolted and wanted Germanicus to be emperor. So this was the first noted time that we had legions wanting their commander to be emperor. And this only happened right after Augustus. So after the first emperor, this already takes place. Now, Germanicus calmed the legions down. He gave them a speech and told them no, he's going to hold to the wishes of Augustus and accepted Tiberius as emperor. Now, Tiberius became jealous of Germanicus because a lot of people felt he should have been emperor. A lot of people felt that he was a lot more capable individually and military than Tiberius. So Tiberius was a little bit jealous of him, and because of this, Tiberius sent Germanicus off to the east, where the legions there were more unruly. And then he had sacked Syrian garrison commander there and put Pisan in charge. And Pisan was overtly against Germanicus. So Tiberius was setting all this up to make Germanicus' job very difficult. Now, Germanicus had great success against the Armenians, the Parthians. He actually conquered Cappadocia, took over that area. And so all of this, I think, made Tiberius more and more jealous. Now, one thing that Tiberius used against him was Germanicus entered Alexandria. Augustus purposely made a law that no Roman general is allowed to enter Alexandria unless approved by the emperor. And so this kind of angered Tiberius. And so from this point on, Germanicus was kind of looked down upon because Pisan and Tiberius played against him. And then his health became fragile. Some believe Tiberius, using Pisan, gave him poison, which deteriorated his health, and then he died. Both Germanicus and Arminius died like in 19 AD. And Arminius actually was trying to be king of the Germans, and a relative actually went to the Romans and said they would poison him for them. And the Romans said, no, we're not going to poison our enemy. We're going to defeat him in battle. Now remember, the Romans did that with Sertorius in Spain. They didn't like that he was betrayed, and Viriathus was also betrayed, and the Romans did not care for that. Now, Emperor Tiberius, he eventually became paranoid and disillusional, and, as according to historians, was a depraved sexual predator. He had retreated to the island of Capri and lived out his remaining years there till 37 AD. Now, family members and relatives who were in line to become emperor were all killed except for Gaius Caligula, and Caligula becomes the third emperor in 37 Now, he did well for the state early on, but then he had fell ill, like a sickness, and after that, he went insane. Now, besides the campaigns that were happened here in Germany, there were armed insurrections that Rome had to deal with. In Britain, the tribes who had come to terms with Caesar was one such place. And then another recurring source of problems was the rapid conquest by the Roman army over vast areas of territory gave them a lot of issues. But even that and the crackpot emperors notwithstanding, the Roman military and provincial governors did run the empire quite well, even when an inept emperor sat on the throne. But too often around the empire, problems constantly arose. For example, in Britain, the Castellanius dynasty extended their influence over southeast Britain, where most tribes were friendly to Rome since the days of Caesar. And in instances like this, the Roman emperor failed to support Roman magistrates and friendly native tribes. On 21 AD, Julius Scorver led a serious revolt in Gaul. He was from the tribe of the Audi, Caesar's old allies, but was defeated by the Roman governor of Germania Superior. The same record of local misgovernment continued throughout the empire and explains why there was many revolts. Now, Caligula, he led an expedition to the Rhine, then to the English Channel, where he claimed victory over the Channel and commanded his troops to plunder the sea by picking up shells in their helmets. Now remember, he went crazy. Now, his waste on ridiculous projects and outrageous lifestyles was draining the treasury. A conspiracy between the Praetorian Guard and the Equestrian Order murdered Caligula by stabbing him, his wife, and their daughter. He would be the first emperor to be murdered. So that would only took what? He was the third one, and he was murdered. Now the Senate tried to use his disastrous reign as a pretext to go back to the Republic. Now, after the killing of the family of Caligula, Claudius, his uncle, tried to go into hiding for fear of being killed also. But when the guard found him, they dragged him out to the balcony, and Claudius feared he was going to be put to death. Instead, the guard pronounced him emperor. Thus, the Julio-Claudio Dynasty was still secure. But this is the power you can see of the Praetorian Guard already. So far, the Romans, under the emperors here, they have the victory at the Lepe River, the loss at Teutoburg Wall, and then Germanicus wins 2 battles and has 1 draw against Arminius. So there's 3 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Now this brings us to our next major battle, Medway River in 43 AD. The new emperor Claudius, wanted to show the Roman citizens and the army that he was a leader, but he needed to conquer new lands, and so he followed up on the British insurrections. He sent several legions under Aulus Plautius. After landing, Plautius pushed inland to the Thames River. Here he encountered a force under Germanicus, who was prepared. Plautius sent a detachment of German auxiliaries across the river to attack the enemy forces to disable their war chariots. On the second day, Vespasian, who becomes a future emperor, he forded the river farther upstream with 1 legion and struck the Britons in the flank. The legionaries routed the less desolate foe. Plautius then moved forward and occupied Campulodon. Claudius himself then landed in Britain and declared that the island could be a province of Rome. Plautius extended the conquest by seizing Lindum, Davia, and Iscuslarium. Although Caractacus continued to harass the marching legions, there was nothing he could do to stop them. So up till 50 AD, I give the Romans a win for this next battle at Shropshire because, like we already stated, Caractacus was carrying out guerrilla warfare against the Romans, and so a force of legionaries under Scapula cornered the chief finally, and the Romans attacked him, and they routed the Britons, but the rebel chief did escape again. Now, he fled north to carry on more guerrilla activities, but he was betrayed and captured. Himself, his wife, and daughter were paraded through the streets of the Roman Forum here. This is cool. You're walking down this, these people were paraded through here. But magnanimously, Claudius spared their lives and freed the entire family. So Claudius was not a bad emperor. However, he met his end due to foul play. His fourth wife, Agrippina, had a son by another marriage. His name was Nero, and she wanted him to be emperor instead of Claudius's biological son, Britannicus, which was by another wife. So she poisoned Claudius, and before he could name an heir, Nero became the emperor. Then Nero poisoned Britannicus in the same way, and then he done in his mother, Agrippina, by the same method. So you can see how Nero's starting out here. Now Nero, he's the fifth emperor in the Julio-Claudio Dynasty, and he was another depraved, delusional emperor. Anyways, during his reign, he did have some revolts going on that the Romans had to take care of. Now, they had revolts going up and down the Rhine, they had revolts in Britain, and they had revolts in the east, and they had to deal with Parthia. So all this went on under his reign, and we're going to talk about all this in the next video.